who's excited to take up Tanya's shiur where we left off, that we just found out, the Alter Rebbe proved to us, that to be a tzaddik is a very rare thing. That Hashem put only a few tzaddikim in every generation. So that clearly shows, once again, that a tzaddik can't just be any old guy who does more good than bad. That, they use the borrowed term tzaddik. Then after that, Alter Rebbe adds in a few cryptic words. He said, U'kamoy shekosuf, and like it says, v'tzaddik yisoid olam. That the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. What does that mean? There's a new thing. After we figured out that there's very few tzaddikim, and you have to be a real, incredible level that your bad side of you, the Yetzer Hara, all the bad feelings, have no say in your life to be a tzaddik. Then you upgrade to tzaddik yisoid olam, is a whole different world. That means that the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Singular, the tzaddik. Because every generation has one tzaddik who is the foundation of the whole world, the leader of that generation, just like Moshe Rabbeinu in his time. And then followed him, there was a whole story, you read the Chumash, yeah? About Yeshua. Moshe says, please appoint for your, he said to Hashem, please appoint a fitting leader for the Jews. And every generation there's been a leader for all the Jewish people. In a very practical sense, means one person who showed the Jewish people in that generation the way to go. In a Chassidish sense, though, in Chassidus, it's a lot deeper. That the tzaddik of the generation is the neshama klolos. He's the neshama which is attached to every individual. That every person has a connection to Hashem, gets guidance of how to connect to Hashem through him, gets inspiration of how to connect to Hashem through him, gets the spiritual power to connect to Hashem through. Like we're going to find out all about that in the end of Perek Beis. Stay tuned for that. So to bring out the point about the tzaddik yisoid olam, there's one tzaddik in the generation. I'd like to speak about the following story. That there's a Yid, the Or HaChaim HaKodesh. Yeah, he's known as the Or HaChaim because his name was Chaim, and he wrote a sefer called Or HaChaim, not to be confused with Or HaChaim out of Shulchan Aruch. So the Or HaChaim HaKodesh was a incredible tzaddik. The Baal Shem Tov said about him that the Or HaChaim is so great. He said about the Or HaChaim, if me and the Or HaChaim would meet each other, Mashiach would come. And the Baal Shem Tov actually went to travel to Eretz Yisrael to meet the Or HaChaim. The Baal Shem Tov was like, we're going to do this. We're going to bring Mashiach by meeting each other. And Hashem apparently didn't want it. And it didn't happen. There's a long, long story about how all sorts of things got in his way that didn't let him go. He went, he was traveling, all sorts of crazy things didn't let him go until he realized that Hashem doesn't want this to happen. This isn't the way the Mashiach comes. Mashiach has to come through us doing Torah mitzvahs, us doing tshuva. But about Or HaChaim HaKodesh, one day came out from his room to his Talmidim and said, the Or HaChaim just passed away. So they're like, how do you know that he just passed away? You know, he lives in Eretz Yisrael. The Baal Shem Tov lived in Poland. It's 1,000 miles apart. Thousands of miles apart. So the Baal Shem Tov said there's one secret that's only revealed to the leader of the Jews of each generation. And it was just revealed to me. If it was just revealed to me, it must be that the Or HaChaim passed away. Because he was the leader of the Yidden in that generation. There's actually, he's only in one generation. There's every generation of Yidden has their own leader. Another example of the Or HaChaim, fascinating example of this. There's an amazing story that goes as follows. That the Or HaChaim had the minhag that Erev Shabbos, he'd get fresh meat for the poor Torah scholars of his community. He'd buy a bunch of prime calves and have them slaughtered kosher, and he'd distribute the meat to the poor Talmidei Chachamim of town. One day there was a meat shortage in town. So he, as usual, bought his calves, but one of the rich people of the community didn't have any meat for Shabbos. So he marched up to the rabbi's house and he says, listen here, Rabbi, I'm a very rich, influential member of the community, and it's in your best interest to give me a meat package. So the rabbi said, I'm sorry, I have to give it to the poor scholars. There's not going to be enough for them. So this guy says, Rabbi, you don't know who you're messing with. Just then one of the poor scholars walks in and says, Rabbi, I'm here to pick up my meat for Shabbos. So this rich guy turns around to the scholar and tells him exactly what he thinks of him. That you're a lowlife, you're a do-goodnik, you sit around, you claim to be learning all day, you're just too lazy to work. He's just attacking the guy, making fun of him, deriding him. And the Talmid Chacham was so embarrassed, he walked off without taking up his package. The Or HaChaim stood there, he didn't want to get involved in this mess. And he just, he didn't butt in at all. Soon the Or HaChaim was informed from heaven that because he stood by and allowed this man, this innocent Talmid Chacham, to be so embarrassed, he was going to be punished. You know what it means to be publicly embarrassed? You know what it means to be embarrassed? Imagine that, being embarrassed in front of the rabbi, the whole community, and no one stands up for you. I don't know if you guys, anyone ever made fun of you? I hope not. But if someone did, if someone stands up for you, you feel like, wow, someone's got my back. If no one does, you're like, it feels as if, almost as if everyone's making fun of you. You know what I'm saying? So, the Orach Chaim, he went into Golus. He decided that he's going to atone for this he's going to do the atonement on his own terms. And he set off to exile himself. And he wandered around from town to village without telling anyone who he was. Just looked like a regular vagabond beggar. So he came to a certain town, and in that town, there was a very holy rabbi as well. Now the Orach Chaim was sitting in shul, and he was walking around. His mind was working overdrive. That at Shabbos, the beginning of Shabbos, he thought up 7 new novel interpretations of a pasuk in that week's parsha. I believe it was Parshat Ba'aloischa. That week's parsha has a very long Orach Chaim. One of the reasons is he thought up 7 new novel interpretations. Then he walked around a bit more, sat down again, thought up another 7 new interpretations of the pasuk. Walked around, his mind's going over and over and over. He sits down, thinks up 7 new interpretations. And guess what? He does it the 4th time. After all that, he goes and he joins the community, davening Mariv. They sit down for the Friday night meal, and the rabbi of the community stops and thinks, and his mind starts to wonder. And he says, it was just revealed to me from heaven, 7 new interpretations. And he starts to explain these 7 interpretations that the Orach Chaim thought up. And then he said, these interpretations were revealed by a great rabbi known as Reb Chaim ben Itter. And then the Orach Chaim, who's in the back of the room, no one knew it was him. He was trying to be in exile. He was trying to cleanse himself. He was trying to be embarrassed instead of being magnified. This isn't the point of why he went to exile, for people to be talking about how great he is. So he calls out when the rabbi said Reb Chaim ben Itter, with a very respectful Reb. He's like, Chaim ben Itter. There was a big ruckus. Everyone's like, excuse me, what are you saying? You're embarrassing the greatest rabbi of our generation. How dare you speak like that? His host is like turning red. He's like, don't worry about him. Something's wrong with him, Nebuch. Just leave him alone. Don't worry about him. So they tell him, if you ever disrespect the Talmud Chacham like that in our town, we're going to make you regret it. Okay, fine. He goes home. Next day, comes to shul, davens. By the meal, Shabbos meal, the whole community gets around. The rabbi of that community was clearly a very holy man. Started to go into a different world. He went into a bit of a trance. And then he said, it was just revealed to me in heaven, 7 new interpretations on the pasuk. And he explained the next 7 interpretations that Orach Chaim thought up. And after saying that, he said, these were revealed by a holy rabbi named Reb Chaim ben Itter. And then in the back, the Orach Chaim goes, Chaim ben Itter. No Reb, just like regular Chaim, regular Joe. And everyone's like, excuse me, the place is like, this guy has an issue. This guy's asking for it, He's making problems. But they're like, okay, you better just stop this. This is your last warning. If you do this again, you're in big trouble. Comes later in the day after Mincha, they sit down for Shalosh Shuddis, the 3rd meal of Shabbos, and the rabbi goes into a trance. He explains another 7 meanings of the pasuk. He says, these were revealed by Reb Chaim ben Itter. And the Orach Chaim, guess what? In the back, he's like, Chaim ben Itter, regular Joe Shmo Chaim. So now the people are like, we gotta give this guy what he deserves. We need to teach him a lesson. But people, the more cooler heads are like, something must be, I don't know, he just doesn't get the point. He must be a bit slow. But let's give him one last chance. You better from now on be respectful. So then it comes after Shabbos, the daven Mariv, they sit down for Malava Malka, the meal after Shabbos. And the rabbi, for the final time, goes into the trance. And he reveals a new 7 meanings of the pasuk that were revealed to him in heaven. So these meanings, these interpretations were revealed by the holy rabbi Reb Chaim ben Itter. And the Orach Chaim, guess what he does? Chaim ben Itter. This time they're fed up with him. That's it. You are a troublemaker. You're asking for it. We don't want someone like you making trouble in our town. They take him to the local community lockup, and they lock him in a cell. I don't think they had a proper, exactly, police or jails back then, but they had a community lockup for someone who's out of control. And they're like, we're going to decide what to do with you later. Fine. The rabbi goes to make Havdalah with the community, and all of a sudden a terrible thunderstorm begins. And it's raining, pouring, howling winds, trees are falling, there's lightning, there's thunder, there's people are freaking out. Where did this crazy storm to suddenly appear from. The lightning is going to probably hit the forest nearby. There could be a fire. There could be a flood. There could be a fire and a flood at the same time. A freak storm they'd never seen like this before in their lives. So they asked the rabbi, what's going on over here? So the rabbi began to think. He went into a trance. And he was a very holy rabbi. He went heavenwards. And he came back down. And he said, not physically went heavenwards. His mind drifted heavenwards. And he said, it's been revealed to me that every Shabbos in heaven, the gates of Gehenna are locked for Shabbos, and no one gets punished over Shabbos. After Shabbos, they need to open it up, and all the souls that their sins in this world should be rectified by going through Gehenna, they don't have anywhere to go, and all the spiritual forces that are supposed to be punishing them have nothing to do. It's locked, and they're all locked out. Every Motzei Shabbos it's opened. But now they're locked out, because every Motzei Shabbos, when the tzaddik of the generation makes Havdalah and says goodbye to Shabbos, that's when Shabbos ends in heaven. But now Shabbos is keeping on going, because something is stopping the tzaddik of this generation from making Havdalah. So these forces, which have nowhere to go, are now being unleashed on our town. He sits down and tries to think, why on our town is receiving the punishment? Because of the tzaddik of the generation, whoever he is, wherever he is, can't make Havdalah. Then he realizes there's one man in this town who hasn't heard Havdalah. He's the stranger we locked up. They go, they let the Orach Chaim out, he makes Havdalah, and then the storm stops, and they realize who he was. It's an unbelievable story. It's a story that shows us that the tzaddik of the generation isn't just a position. It's not like a president. It's not just a teacher. It's not just a guide. It's someone who all the spiritual worlds are waiting on him, are dependent on him. It's someone who has so much responsibility and so much ability. That's what it means to be a tzaddik of the generation. So what do we see from the Tanya? By the way, seeing we have time, by the looks of things, I'd just like to mention something very interesting. That there was a great tzaddik of our times. When I say our times, by now it's probably your grandfather's times. But the great tzaddik whose name was the Baba Sali. I don't know if you guys ever saw the letters the Rebbe wrote to the Baba Sali, but the amount of titles. When the Rebbe wrote letters, he didn't really write many titles. The Frierdiker Rebbe, when he wrote letters, he wrote a lot of titles for people. Even simple people, he wrote great titles. Someone actually once asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, why do you write such great titles for people who are clearly not such great people? So the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote, I write what they're capable of being. I write what their potential is. I write what they could be. The Rebbe kept it very simple. The Rebbe is very rare to see more than a line of titles. And Baba Sali, not only several lines of titles, but if you look at the titles the Rebbe gave to Baba Sali, they're very, very important and meaningful titles in accordance with the teachings of Kabbalah. The Baba Sali was a great Kabbalist, and you look at what the Rebbe called him, and it seems that the Rebbe identified him as one of the tzaddikim shemuatim, one of the few real tzaddikim that exist in every generation. It seems from the things that the Rebbe called him, that I believe the Rebbe called him Chad Mibnei Aliyah. So that's a title that only goes for the very handful of real tzaddikim, people who don't have a Yetzirah, people who have superseded human nature. So this tzaddik, the Baba Sali, lived in Morocco with a big Jewish community. You know, there used to be massive Jewish communities in Morocco and Syria and Iraq and Yemen, and sadly our Arab cousins weren't too happy with them and didn't let them live peaceful lives. That's a story for another time. But anyways, Baba Sali was leaving Morocco together with most other Moroccan Yidden in the year Tafshin Yud Gimel, that's 1953. And he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. You'll never believe this. You know what he wrote to the Rebbe? He wrote, Lubavitcher Rebbe, I just want to learn Torah. That's all I want to do with my life. Can you imagine Baba Sali, a Yid who just wanted to learn Torah all day. So people are always coming and asking me questions. This guy wants a blessing. This guy wants advice. This guy's business is failing. I don't have any time to learn. So it's like, Rebbe, here's an idea. I'm going to move to Brooklyn, New York. I'll live down the street from you. Next to you, no one will pay any attention to me. And then everyone will come ask you the questions, and I'll sit and learn Torah. An amazing idea. You can see such a yid. He's sitting there every day thinking, I wish I could just sit and learn Torah 24 hours a day. A real yid. That's what the real yid looks like. Anyways, you know what the Rebbe wrote back to him? The Rebbe wrote back, you're needed in Israel. You have to go, travel to Eretz Yisrael, and be a leader for the Jews there. And that's what happened. He was a leader for millions of Jews. There's still millions of Sephardic Jews to this day, years after he passed away, who are still inspired by his teachings. So it was definitely the right choice. They moved there. But we see here two real tzaddikim who recognize the greatness of the other. And the Baba Sali, even being such a great tzaddik, he still writes to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe, you're the ultimate. Next to you, no one's even going to notice me, and I'll be able to happily learn Torah all day. It's another example, one other example we really have to wrap up, of being a tzaddik of a generation, that he is the tzaddik of the generation, the leader of every yid, just like Moshe Rabbeinu. But one of the reasons, everyone knows the story, one of the reasons why Moshe was selected for greatness is because when he was an anonymous shepherd in the land of Midian, he was in exile, he was thrown out of Egypt, they were running after him, he had to run away before they kill him. And he was a shepherd, and he had one little sheep that wandered away from the flock, and he hiked off to go rescue that one little sheep and make sure it had what to eat and what to drink. He didn't leave any stragglers behind. That's one of the reasons why Hashem said, you're the person I want leading the Jews, because you care about every single individual. No one's too small for you. So, you see with the Rebbe, there was a fascinating story about one of the most tragic events in history of Israel, that there was a terrorist raid in the north of Israel, where they went to a high school. It was a boarding school. There was like 100 kids in school, and they took them all hostage. The Israelis ran in to do a commando raid to kill the terrorists, and it was a bit of a botched operation. I'm not sure what actually happened. It was a tragedy. Look, they tried their best, but ended up being a bunch of kids were tragically killed. And I believe it was 27 casualties, if I remember correctly. So when the reports about this was going out, the whole Jewish world was in shock. So one of the secretaries of the Rebbe came in and said there was 25 children killed by terrorists in Israel. And the Rebbe said 27. So this secretary is the one who gets the news, who's in charge of giving the Rebbe the news. The Rebbe's not listening to the news. The Rebbe doesn't have any access to news except through his, through the channels that's supposed to give it to him. Then the secretary went back. A couple of hours later, a new news report came out. They discovered it was 27 people. So then the secretary went into the Rebbe and was like, Rebbe, how do you know? The news anchors didn't even know yet. No one knew. How do you know what was going on the other side of the world? The Rebbe said every neshama that comes or leaves this world has to come through this room first. The Rebbe said about his room. It has to come through this room first. I was once speaking to a 14-year-old bocher who said that the Rebbe's room must have had a lot of traffic. Must be in a busy place. Yeah, I don't think that's the point of the story. You understand, souls don't exactly take up space like people. It's a spiritual thing. It means that the Rebbe is keeping track of every single Jew. A real leader of the generation cares for and notices every single soul of that generation. You'll notice this even with Gentiles, that the Rebbe said that there was a situation where the bad guys, there was a raid against a bunch of, I can't remember, it was an enemy army. And the Rebbe said, this isn't a good thing. People are dying. Kind of people dying. They're people. So, what do we see? That there's one leader of the generation. And this is all bringing out the point of the Tanya. That tzaddik is not just a regular good guy. The ultimate tzaddik is above and beyond, one in the generation. Then to be a real tzaddik, there's only very few in every generation. And then, to be a Rasha sounds pretty easy. If all you have to do is just be lazy a little bit. Sounds pretty simple. What the Bainani is, I have no idea. I guess we're going to have to stay tuned to find out. Signing.